Hi there everyone, my name is Molly. I'm the onboarding manager to WorkSmarter, and today I'm joined by our wonderful partners Charlotte and Katie from P3 People Management, and today we're going to be talking about the upcoming changes that are happening with the Employment Rights Bill in April. So question one, from your perspective, what is the single biggest HR compliance risk facing SMEs right now?
Okay, well that's an easy one. The Employment Rights Act. It's been spoken about, I think, probably for a couple of years now, and it's already started coming into effect. I think because it's multi-layered and it's going to be rolled out over a period of years, there's an element where there's a heightened risk at the moment because where are we? April is the first real phase of rollout of changes. But then there's phases in October, there's January 2027, it'll be October 27. So there's a risk that businesses might panic right now of what does it all mean for me, but also the risk that that panic dies down and the noise goes a bit quieter and they think, oh, it's all done, until another wave comes. So there's a challenge for all business leaders, really, I think, to understand what that means for them. And we would call it cutting through the noise rather than just reading a whole ream of information and stopping and thinking, well, I have no idea what I need to do now. We're encouraging businesses to see this as a real opportunity to check their processes, check their ways of working, check their documentation, not just because of the changes from the Employment Rights Act, but it's good housekeeping. You know, quite often, you know, your house needs painting, right? Or you want some new cushions in your lounge, but it's never really on the top of the to-do list until your mother-in-law is coming to stay or your friends are coming around for a party. Then all of a sudden that becomes the only thing on your to-do list before the weekend. So that's where we are now. We're encouraging business owners to switch out their cushions and their colour charts of their house. And we're saying, look, just take a good look around. Don't wait until the time comes is actually make those changes now, because they can make a real big difference, and they're substantial changes. You mentioned about the single biggest risk within that. Just to heighten, I think the one that's the sexiest, the one that gets all the talk, is unfair dismissal rights, because everyone talks, oh, you've got to have 2 years service before you can claim unfair dismissal, which is correct at the moment. That is changing, not to day one. It's changing to 6 months, and that won't be until January 27. So you see what I mean, that businesses might go, oh, it's 12 months away. Well, it's only 12 months away if you think about the date it comes into play. But if you've employed someone in July this year, 26, they will hit 6 months service in January 27. So they will have unfair dismissal rights. So unless you've changed your processes now, you will already get caught in that trap. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
So that's the big one. And layered with that is, and this is coming in this year, at the moment as an employee, if you were to leave your organization, you have 3 months to bring a claim for unfair dismissal or for any unfair treatment. That's being extended for you to 6 months. So that's the first bite of the cherry. You get longer to bring your claim. And bear in mind that most claims can be brought about not because the process itself was unfair, but it's how you were made to feel going through that process. You might be angry, upset, bitter, and you think, well, I'm just going to bring a claim. So you've now got 6 months to deal with those emotions and bring that claim. And one last bit to mention, another one that's not talked a lot about, is this Fair Work Agency. So if you struggle to complete an ET1 and bring an employment tribunal claim, or you get a bit bored halfway through, or you don't know what words to use, there is now going to be an agency that will help you do it. So as an employer, I am switching out my colours. I should be looking right now about what my house is and what I've got in play, not because something might come in 27, it's because the way that the legislation's coming, it's all interplaying, will impact everybody, every worker, up to and including senior people. Because added to that, my last layer is the cap on unfair dismissal is going to be gone. So many people who exceed the limit at the moment of unfair dismissal may not bother bringing a claim, or they settle for less because I can't get any more through the courts. Well, they will now. So can you see, as an employer, everything seems to be stacking up. So that alone, never mind all the other changes I could cover, those changes alone are reason for getting your teams together, getting your management teams together, and cleaning house.
Brilliant stuff. And where do you see businesses commonly falling short?
I would say where they're not, either not think it's going to affect them or not getting the basics right. And I'll give you an example. We dealt with a client recently whose contract of employment had been probably in error, put together incorrectly on a particular clause, and it was a notice period clause. And what that meant was the employee was entitled to both the contractual notice and the statutory notice. So it looked like someone's cut and pasted, either in error or without the knowledge of what they've actually done. So these are simple things. So checking contracts of employment, checking your processes, and not just processes that sounds good. Is it agile for your business? Is it fit for purpose for your business? And is it compliant with the legislation? So there are small changes, but really meaningful changes. And that, I think, is where businesses fall short, because it's changing the cushions. It's not sexy. It's not exciting. But let me tell you, when it comes to the push, that piece of paper can be the difference between, in this case, paying out 3 months' notice or 6 months' notice. That's a lot more money.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And following on from there, what operational HR foundation should every SME have in place, regardless of their size?
Well, I think size does matter from that perspective with some foundations, but I think ultimately you're looking at your full employee life cycle. So in terms of onboarding, so adding to what Charlotte was just saying there, in terms of contracts of employment, every employee must receive a written statement of particulars on day one of employment. So it's looking at the structure to those in terms of, have you got your fundamentals like hours of work in there, holiday entitlement, notice periods again, probationary periods, and making sure those basic foundations in terms of what the makeup of that role look like, and getting that covered from day one for your employees. Again, no matter how many you've got. Similarly, from a compliance perspective, you've got things like right to work checks. You need to make sure that they're in place as soon as possible, ideally day one, if not before. You know, there are penalties from that perspective as well if an employee is not getting those foundations correct. And also when you come around to the pay of that employee, so are they getting pay slips? Are you enrolling them from a pension perspective if they're eligible? Are you making sure that they're getting national minimum wage? And, you know, that can lead on to your record keeping as well. So have you got somewhere to store your contracts of employment? Have you got somewhere to store your right to work and have alerts if you need them? For example, if there's someone whose is going to expire. Absence records and disciplinary and grievance records as well. That can obviously help a manager manage their people. And I'd see that as a fundamental foundation, as well as obviously you've got then into your employment in terms of policies and guidelines and procedures, what you expect from your people. And that can obviously lead right through to your performance reviews, probations, reporting lines. You know, you've got your managers being able to manage those people and what tools have they got to do so. And I think for me, that leads right into when you've got someone leaving the business as well. So have you got a record of their resignation? Are you doing, you know, things like exit interviews, which might not be seen as a foundation, but can give you some really good feedback to allow you to manage and change things in the business.
Wonderful. And what impact does poor record keeping have during disputes or audits?
It's access to your data, I think, most of the time. So if you've got that poor access, it can be difficult to demonstrate your compliance. If you go back to the right to work, where are you storing that? You know, paper gets lost. You may have just one manager storing things. They may not be in the business on a day something is needed. And it's more difficult as well to demonstrate some of your issues. So, for example, if you've got a problem with time off in terms of lateness, or someone not taking their holidays or disputing their holiday entitlement, or now the legislations are changing in terms of things like bereavement leave, etc. It's harder to demonstrate, are you following your statutory requirements in that perspective, and allowing your managers to look at that data and see where, you know, gaps may be in their teams, for example. So yeah, having that data easily accessible for the manager and the employee will help with those disputes and those audits perspective and keeping yourselves on track, really.
Yeah, of course. And I suppose a question for the both of you would be really to ask if you could give one piece of advice to a business owner that may be feeling slightly overwhelmed by HR, what would that be?
It's up to both of us.
I'll let you.
Mine would be, as someone who can be very familiar with that sense of overwhelm, is to break it down and not feel that you need to tackle everything at once. So I know I've given you a brief snapshot of some of the changes that are coming in, but we have time, you know, for businesses to look at their organization, look at what's working, understand what's coming down the track. I'm bound to say this, but seek advice from people like ourselves, who we are not about putting things in place for the sake of it. We're not about asking companies to spend a lot of money to make a lot of change. First of all, get your house in order and see what's what. What have you got that works? What have you got that's missing? What can we do to make that a bit better? And then just create a simple plan. What's priority now? And what doesn't need to happen until later on? Or what would be a nice to have versus a need to have? And one key thing is check with your managers. Do they know and do they understand what's required of them with regards to the new legislation that's coming, and indeed the legislation that's already in place? Because no matter what you have, no matter what documentation you have, it takes somebody to deliver the message. It takes a person to manage our people, and those people need to be trained, skilled. They need to have, the knowledge of what they're dealing with, the skills and the empathy and the communication to be able to deliver that message to protect the business. As I say, it's not just always about following the process incorrectly. It's about how that message is delivered. No matter how difficult it is, that can be the difference that makes a difference. So just take a long, hard look at what you've got, create a plan, and obviously we'd say speak to us or someone like us that you have in your sphere who can help you bring that overwhelm down and see a really clear way forward.
Brilliant stuff. Amazing advice. And if you do have any questions, please let us know. We can pop you in touch. But we'd like to thank you all for your time today, and especially to P3 People Management. And we look forward to speaking with you all soon.